Welcome to GTM Confessions, where we share what it takes to be a go-to-market professional today, because it's freaking hard and it's far from the glamorous picture that social media often paints. Consider this show your weekly go-to-market therapy session. I'm your host, Stephanie Cox. I have more than 20 years of experience, and I've done almost everything go-to-market related in my career. In this episode, I chat with Dave Galante, Senior Director of Product Management at ActiveCampaign, about the challenges of being a product manager, misconceptions around product MVPs, the role of product marketing, and so much more. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm excited to have you on the show. I've known you for, a while. We worked together at ExactTarget. It's been a little bit, but now the Salesforce is what got acquired too. But one of the things that I wanted to have you on the show talk about is you've had a really extensive background in product and product marketing in a wide variety of industries, not just tech. So I think maybe to kind of like level set us, I would love to hear your perspective on what the role of product is in an organization.
Yeah, great question. And so, we went through a lot of iterations at different companies, and I think I've seen product, I think, evolve over time too. But it's really like the synthesizer of a lot of different groups. So when you're in product, you get, there's no shortage of good ideas from companies. And so you're pulling in all the ideas and suggestions from your customers, from client success, from sales, from engineering in terms of tech stacks that need to be improved. And ultimately, as a product manager, you're kind of balancing all these things, all these different requests, and also putting together a vision of where you see that product going. And I think that's really kind of the fun part of being in product, is that you get to kind of convey this idea of here's where we're going, in the next 4 releases or the next year or next 2 years. And I need all of you guys to help me get there because we could be successful together. So it's really just a lot of organization, ruthless prioritization. Like we can't do everything all at the same time. So being really clear about what we can do and what we can't do, and then executing on that plan.
Because everyone wants something from you all the time and they all want it to be now.
Exactly. And so, I think the thing that really is exciting is that you get this great customer interaction, and you want to basically be able to say yes to everything. And there are some great ideas from customers. I think the trap that we kind of get into sometimes is we're fulfilling the needs of like one individual customer or a very small segment of our customers versus like working on things that unlock a new industry or a new vertical, or something that's really a key competitive point that our customers are using, or our clients or our competitors using against us. So it's like, just using that input from a customer to understand, hey, this is important, but balancing that against, I've got maybe 1,000 clients, and is that going to be related or important to over a certain percent of all of them.
Well, the other thing you have to balance is the internal stakeholders, which oftentimes can be one of the loudest groups when you have sales. Engineering cares a lot. You mentioned about like tech stack, but also tech debt. And then you
Yeah.
have customer success, who is, on the hook for renewals, ideally upsells as well. So how do you think about like the struggles that you face with trying to balance the needs of those internal stakeholders who can be very loud, and also, what sales says they need is to sell more, which is ultimately the end goal, right? But customer
Mhm.
success needs maybe very different things. Engineering cares
Yeah.
about things that oftentimes are so under the hood you don't see. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you think about trying to get all of that concise and usable and not go crazy?
No, I mean, there's probably no one way or best way of doing it, but I think the key is what are things that are really blocking important activities. Like, let's say onboarding, for example, right? If you're a client success managers that are telling you, like, our customers can't see value in the product because they can't get a workflow up and running without a support ticket, like that is like a huge red flag, right? Like that's something you have to address right away, because that's going to affect, adoption of the product, longevity of the brand. And ultimately, you're going to see insurance numbers, right? Because you're going to see clients onboarding or showing interest in the product. But then when they get to the onboarding stage, they're not able to see value. That is like, I think listening for things like that are really, really important.
Do you think it's easy for a product manager to be able to identify those roadblocks? Because I don't know, like in my experience, I feel like sometimes the other internal stakeholders don't see them necessarily as roadblocks. They see them at, or everything's a roadblock, when in reality, maybe that isn't accurate. So, do you
Yeah.
think it's easy for a product manager to see like the clear roadblocks and be able to prioritize those, or is that sometimes challenging as well?
Yeah, I think it's challenging because there's going to be a lot of different voices and different loudnesses of those voices, and I think and trying to maybe just sift through all that is easier said than done. Definitely, other things to hear about is difficulty of sale, right? So if salespeople aren't able to, you know, successfully close deals because they don't have collateral, then it's like, okay, now that's a product marketing, initiative or product marketing partnership that you could unblock, through that avenue versus engineering, right? So I think, if you're looking at like a lot of different inputs coming in, are all those inputs or all those problems engineering related issues, or can some of them be solved with really good communication and battle cards or competitive decks or things like that, where you can have that running in parallel with sprint plans and releases from the engineering team.
I think that's a really great point and something that a lot of people, I think, don't take advantage of, because there are ways to address a lot of those issues, like you mentioned, without requiring code to be written.
Exactly, exactly. And that's growth hacking, right? That's just really kind of figure out how to partner with everyone on the teams, across the teams, to get your metrics up without it being a constant battle of how many sprint points do I have in my next release. Like that's always going to be a struggle, like trying to find other ways of solving problems.
Yeah, you've never lived until you have to fight for sprint points in a release cycle. So one of the things that product deals a lot with is kind of that first initial MVP. So, which there's a lot of feelings around that phrase, which we can talk more about in a second. But what does it mean for a product MVP in your opinion?
Yeah, I love this, and we talked about this a bit before, and I think before the MVP really gets defined in terms of like priorities and use cases, I think you first have to make a quick assessment. Like, is there a launch plan? So the launch plan really is the master, kind of schedule of everything that has to happen, from legal to finance to, product marketing, website updates, pricing, discounting for partners. Like there should be like a really good list of things that have to happen across the board first. And then when it comes down to like identifying MVP use cases, then you're able to kind of say, okay, like here's our priorities, onboarding, for example, right? We want our clients to be able to see a very easy way to interact with the product and the company. The second thing is a workflow, right? So can they actually get in and get a job to be done or accomplish a pain point? And then can they measure that? And so I think those first three things, onboarding, workflows, and measurement are core. The bonus one is a growth loop. Can you also bring in another person from that organization into your product or your platform? So maybe that's in that workflow, there's a report, and that report is sent out not just to one person, but to a Slack channel, for example. And now you've got this kind of like network effect that Andrew Chen has been talking about across all his product management and growth hacking books. But I think like back to your original question about MVP, it's really priorities and use cases, and I think keeping those four things in mind are also really important in that.
So why do you think so many companies struggle with the concept of an MVP? Because sometimes it feels, at least, in my experience, almost like a dirty word inside the company. like it's been slapped together and it's not fit for like external use, when I think you and I have a very different perspective on it. So I'd love to hear why you think like that can be a struggle internally.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you said in the very beginning is everybody wants everything right now. And I think, you know, I think if you're able to go back to like the onboarding and the workflows and you can quickly show value, MVP doesn't sound so bad because I think if MVP, for example, didn't have workflow or didn't have the ability to measure, then it really is a broken experience, right? You're maybe just sign up and you can't do anything, or you can't share that result with a team member like that. That kind of like really kind of breaks a good product launch motion. But I think this also telling all the stakeholders, this is MVP. We're going to catch up. We're going to be iterating and adding more functionality. Be prepared for this. And I think this is something that like a lot of companies that are moving from, let's say, like a traditional on-prem, kind of software to SaaS. This is a big struggle for the entire organization because when you're in SaaS, you're moving so much faster. And if you're launching MVP product, it's going to be really fast. So everyone who's taking documentation, who is doing client support, I mean, they're going to be seeing changes in the product and the experience rapidly over the next, let's say, 6 months. So buckle up, right?
Which, if you're used to it, is great and you love. And if you're not used to it, it feels
It's a
very
shock.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It
I was gonna say, do you think changing like the nomenclature of MVP would be helpful?
Well, I mean, I think it's minimum viable product. So the minimum word is really what is scary to people. And I think it's really like a salesperson's biggest fear of, hey, I've got a great, client who's interested. They meet the ICP criteria, but I know I'm selling an MVP product. Can it perform? And I think if you go back to priorities and use cases, if you understand what that client is expecting to do with the product, and those use cases are fulfillable in the MVP version, then you're okay. The stretch is, let's just say, and I launched a product like this that was an MVP that didn't have a mobile app component to it initially, right? So it was all web based. You could do a lot of things with the web version. You could onboard, you can install devices, you can monitor devices, you could set workflows and triggers based upon different events that are happening, but it didn't have a mobile app. But it seemed like a very natural progression to add a mobile app. So if you're in sales and you're like, well, I'm selling something that's an MVP, it's missing a vital component like a mobile app, but I believe the team can deliver that within the next few months, then they're going to feel comfortable selling that MVP version of the product.
I know you just mentioned this with sales being uncomfortable, but there's also, I think, as you balance constant iteration, other internal pushback from documentation, from customer success, how do you think about preparing them for that?
I think bringing them along into the ride is really important. So it's like, hey, I'm as a product leader, you're communicating what's happening next, but you're also getting their feedback on the best way to communicate that. Are we maybe putting too much into this release? Do we need to maybe just break it up so that it's not such a heavy lift in terms of like maybe navigating around the app, for example? But yeah, I think it's definitely like creating that team, that launch plan where everyone from documentation to client success to support is aware of what's happening, because the worst thing you want is a client calling you and asking you about a report and no one in support knows about this function, right? Because those are going to go right back to the product manager and we're going to get in this endless loop of support requests.
No, I agree. So, one of the things that you have to do a lot in kind of this stage is communication about both internally and externally. So, how do you think about communicating that a new product is available and when it's in kind of that MVP or beta stage externally? How do you tell customers about it or decide what channels that you use?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think externally, I mean, I would never use or recommend using the term MVP. But I'd say, you know, make it exciting. It's a launch. We're launching a new product. I mean, getting the awareness of that out there is most important. If you're launching a new product within a existing company, then you can do a lot of segmentation and kind of targeting of were there clients that were looking for this functionality before through win-loss data or through NPS surveys. Of course, that's your best target audience to go to first to say, hey, we've listened to you, and now we've added something in addition to what you have today to basically solve another problem you have.
Do you think, and I've seen mixed views on this, I would love to hear your perspective. Do you think it is okay when you internally are saying this is like the MVP, the first kind of iteration, we know we're gonna rapidly iterate on it over the next 6 months. At what point do you think it's okay to make more of that broader messaging and positioning, not just segmented, and make it kind of like this is the initial launch, knowing especially that it's going to take time for your sales team to sell it. It's going to take
Yeah.
to either existing or new customers. Is there anything that you've found to be, hey, like if it meets these criteria or it's this situation, it makes sense? Or does it, or do you prefer to wait till it's further along and closer to more of that GA state? Because I've seen companies do it both ways.
Yeah, I mean it's or in like a gated process where you're gating access only to maybe net new customers, or customers that have a certain kind of like bundle options. um I think those are sometimes good options. It kind of depends on you know um the expectations of the product. Like, is it incremental? Is this like, we're all in on this? Like, this is going to save the company. Like, I think those are different situations that kind of, might control how loudly you go with the new product.
Yeah, because I think I know I've been like a customer of other large like SaaS platforms in the past, and I've sat at like a customer conference where they announce like a brand new product and you're so excited, and then it's like, oh, but like you can't have it yet.
Yeah, yeah. Or
Which
it's coming soon,
or it's coming
or
soon. TBD.
yeah, TBD. And I think, like that's kind of like can be frustrating for some customers, but I think it's also like, hey, like you could be part of the process to shape it. When we were at Salesforce, and we launched the product, or the Group Connect platform for Line. I mean, that was integrating with a whole new, over the top messaging platform in Japan. We needed a lot of customer feedback when it came to like what are all the ultimate use cases that need to be enabled with that product line. And we were lucky, I think, to have Salesforce, allow us to kind of talk to customers very directly, to understand ultimately where they wanted to go with creating their brand experience on a whole new platform. And I think just being open about that is really key.
Well, and there are, early adopters that want to be part of those, and help improve the product. I think they tend to be your biggest advocates. They're the
Yeah,
loudest, but they're also the biggest advocates long term.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
So the other challenge I think you face in these situations is managing timeline expectations, like internally and externally, because we all have instant gratification needs. We need it now. So how do you think about setting those expectations so people understand kind of like what the process is to go from that MVP to something that's GA? And then in the world of SaaS, like it's always constantly evolving.
Yeah, constantly iterating. So I think the first thing is like, how rapidly does your organization move? Are you on a monthly release cycle, quarterly release cycle? Like, I mean, are you pushing code daily? And so, I think kind of getting a sense of like how quickly can you release new software is a big component. I think the bigger companies, this becomes more of an issue because quarterly cycles just are just bigger chunks of functionality. Um, so it is more of a big jump, right? Your first version that's internally an MVP in Q1 could drastically be improved in Q2. All right. I mean, the thing is, you do have the ability kind of in 3 months to make some major improvements. However, the bigger companies have longer QA cycles. They have, more strict, soak testing. So that might also slow things down. So I think really understanding like how fast can you actually move is probably the first thing to kind of get a sense of before communicating how quickly the product will be evolving.
Well, and I think part of the challenge, at least I've experienced, when you do have those longer cycles, is when you go from kind of like your first iteration to your second, and there's like a quarter or 2 quarters in between, it almost feels, even though it's not like a completely different product, because it can change so drastically versus when you are on more of like, a bi-weekly release cycle, it does feel more like iterative.
Yeah, yeah. I think the one thing that maybe is a good way to mitigate some of that kind of release cycle or release early is being consistent with pricing. So, or even allowing discounts and saying, look, during this phase where we're taking feedback, we're offering a discount, and that'll maybe only last a year. But it kind of just lessens the pressure to basically put out something that is pixel perfect, and allow customers to say, hey, I'm going to give you feedback and I'm going to take a 20% discount, for example. But then at a certain point, that needs to kind of drop off, and you have your full-fledged product.
So part of this is ties into product market fit, which you and I both know is so important. So I think maybe just to level set, how do you define product market fit?
So I think there's a couple of key indicators that give you a good sense that you're there. I mean, I don't think there's ever like a green flag that flies and says, "Oh, congratulations, you've made it." But like if you look at like onboarding, like success rates, if you have a free to paid experience, like that's a really good way of measuring product market fit, because if you're accumulating users in the free version of your product, but they're not raising their hand to go to paid, you've got product market fit with their free version, but they're not seeing enough value in that paid version. So I think there's a couple of like things like that, like conversion rates between free to paid, and ultimately, churn rates. And I think this is really something that can really be hard to kind of correct. So if you're a mature SaaS product, you've been around for, 5, 10, 15 years, and you're starting to see these higher churn rates, like that is a giant red flag, right? I mean, you got to figure out like, what is going on. Is it product market fit? Is it, just bugs? Is it competitive, other solutions that are taking your clients? But yeah, I think there's like a couple of things like, customers coming in, onboarding, seeing value, and then also churn rates.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned how like, there's not this green flag that says congratulations, you have product market fit, which is what I feel like the internet and social media leads you to believe that like
Mhm.
once you have it, it's congratulations, you are on the path to success.
Yeah, I think it's easy to lose. It really is. And it's one of those things where I think just looking at those metrics to figure out like, are you somewhere, between the lines of the road, or are you starting to go off? But yeah, it's definitely something that I think you can lose. And we talked about that a little bit before. Once you have it, there's no guarantee that you're going to keep it. The market changes, the competitive landscape changes. Um, there's all kinds of factors that can derail you.
Well, and I think once you lose it, it's even harder to get it back the next time. And I think people underestimate, especially like CEOs, boards, VCs, like how critical it is to stay on top of, like you were saying, like these metrics to see where you're at and how you need to continually evolve and iterate to keep product market fit. And competitors are a huge component of that. So, how do you think about product market fit when it comes to the competitive landscape and what you need to be aware of to stay competitive and keep your product market fit and not let someone else eat your lunch?
Yeah, I mean, we're all trying to do that to our competitors, right? I mean, there's only so much of a pie that is available to a client's budget, right? And we're all going after the same slice of pie. So I think there is like the product market. fit part of it is the product, right? Can the product actually solve a problem, and is there value there? But there's a lot of other parts that make people churn. It is, customer support. It is, their account manager. Do they feel like they're getting informed about the product and where the things are going, where the company is going? So, you know, if you look at churn rates, like it's not always I'm not seeing value in what I'm paying you as a vendor. It could be just I'm not getting good support. So I think, trying to figure out those two things. And I've seen some companies where the support has been fantastic. I mean, like we're over servicing customers. We're pulling reports for them. We're emailing it to them. Like we're literally an agency, running the job for them, but they're still churning because they want to basically have something else, and that something else may not be necessarily a product thing. It just could be a services thing. Like they want full service.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes to know until you're in that situation because I've been there too, where you go above and beyond from a services standpoint, and it puts you in an interesting situation because if you
Yeah.
are a software company,
Yeah.
you don't want to be like an agency. You want agency
Exactly.
partners to do that for you.
Yeah.
And it's hard I think a lot of startups start down that path and trying to make customers super successful, and it's really hard to shift that boat away.
Oh, it's impossible.
Yeah, it really
I
is.
mean, yeah, I mean, really, like no one, no brand appreciates that more than they love to have someone from the vendor, doing the work for them, and then all of a sudden saying, "Hey, we created a report that does this for you." They still want you to do it for them. Like it's really it can be a bit frustrating because I had this experience before where we built a fantastic, kind of self-serve reporting platform, and we still had clients who were like, "Yeah, can you just email me the report?" I'm like, "There's an automation that does it for you."
Right. And they don't love it when you're like, I'll walk you through how you can do that and you can
Yeah,
set it up. And they're just like, yeah, but could you like just do it for me?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's hard.
yeah. It
Well,
is. It is.
and I think the other thing about that too, I love that you said like, competitors are always trying to kind of like go after what you have and you're trying to do it too. But it's not just like product market fit. I think oftentimes people think is just about like the product and the functionality. And it's really right. And takes into account, like you were saying, customer support, customer
Hmm.
success, your pricing strategy, like everything. And all of that can change drastically. One of the things that I've seen happen a lot lately is like software is becoming a lot more commoditized, and it'll be really
Hmm.
interesting to see like with AI how much more that's impacted. But you can have a new competitor come in and steal a ton of customers away from you by having, 80 to 85% of your product offering from a functionality perspective, but doing it at such a low cost, it
Yeah.
becomes almost crazy not to. And those are really hard situations to compete with
Completely.
because typically, a more established company is probably going to have a lot bigger expense model that is going to require them to have a higher cost. Um,
Yeah. I think that the thing that to kind of defend against that is whatever you're doing today, however you're gaining new customers, are you able to show a very quick ROI? Or, are you saving them time and money by automating something? Like I think this really emphasizing that the time save is critical because I think everyone's looking for that right now. And I don't know if AI is the answer for all of our problems, but the bottom line is like, does your customer see value in the SaaS fee that they're paying every single month? And is the pain to move somewhere else great enough where they're not going to do that? But I tell you what, if competitor X is offering even the same price, but they're solving more of your problems and they're making it more easier to do, then you're gonna have a problem.
very much so. One of the other big challenges, I think, when it comes to product functionality and determining what to do, is balancing between growth drivers that help you bring on net new logos and reducing churn. Because it's an interesting conundrum in a lot of software companies. There is a overemphasis on net new logos. At least that's been my experience for the last 20 plus years. even though that if you look at revenue for the year, they're going to bring in such a small portion of the overall total revenue for an established company, right?
Yeah.
Typically, your renewals and upsells are going to bring in 80% plus of the company's annual revenue. But growth drivers are oftentimes the squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
So how do you think about trying to balance both of them? Because they're both equally important, and it is more costly to acquire a new customer than it is to retain one.
Wow. Yeah. That's a great question. I think the growth drivers that you're building to build net new logos always has to be there. There always has to be like like that's the roadmap, right? That's why you're investing, in product designers to create beautiful user interfaces. That's why you're hiring engineers to basically, create the infrastructure so that the feature that you're building can scale across all of your customers. But I think the part that I get a little bit concerned about, I've seen before, is that we invest a lot in building new features and functionality, but we have to use those to retain customers that are about to churn. And then if you're seeing like this failure to do upsell, I think that's really another kind of red flag. So if you're successfully seeing existing clients spending more with new functionality, that's a green flag. Like that's ideally what you want to see, and you want to see, the adoption of those the new functionality being used for growing ACV. If you're seeing new functionality being used to retain logos and retain dollars, I think that's something that is basically a bigger problem.
So we've talked a lot about product and kind of product functionality and how it fits in the organization. And then we have product marketing, which is very closely aligned, but also different. So how would you describe the role that product marketing plays in the company?
Yeah, it's super important. And I think it's like the best friend relationship. I think, product managers, product and product marketers are just working hand in hand. And it's like I think about it as like a pre-launch, during development, and then a post-launch. Because pre-launch, you work with product marketing on the competitive landscape. Where does this new functionality fit? How does it make us more competitive in a certain market or against a certain competitor? You're also working with product marketing on pricing. So what's the value of this, and how much do we think we could charge for it? And also, what are our competitors charging for it? So that's a great example of how product and product marketing work together. And then afterwards, the adoption, kind of metrics and customer feedback, and doing things like customer advisory boards as well. So I think it's like a really it's such an important role in overall product growth and SaaS growth. But yeah, it's tough to do it right. I mean, it's a really it can be a really hard job in product marketing.
It really is. And I think it's like highly misunderstood that the role that it plays and how unique it is in the business and how important it is. Um, I think part of that's because a lot of what it does is very cross-functional. Like you mentioned, right? You're working with product, but you're also working with customer success support. You're also working with marketing. Sometimes product marketing reports up through product, sometimes it reports up through marketing. Um, I know like a couple of us have a hot take that it should report directly to the CEO because it's that important. But
Yeah.
how do you think about product marketing? And what's interesting to me is it has a role that is kind of similar, but very different to brand and demand gen, because they're all responsible for communicating the message to the market, trying to drive brand awareness and interest for, if you're a software company, literally the products that you sell. So how do those three kind of functional areas work together? Because in most companies, they might be part of marketing, but they're all separate teams typically.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like interesting because there's product marketing who is, I think, really focused on helping the industry understand what a certain part of the product does, or what the core product does, like very like concretely, succinctly detailing what it can do and the value that it brings. But then when you look at like general marketing, like brand marketing, it gets a bit like broader. So, and I think sometimes when I hear like a lot of like marketing or brand marketers talk, like for big like a Pepsi or like a big like that, I'm just like, wow, like I have no idea what you're even talking about. But oh, it's Doritos. Okay, I understand Doritos. So I think you've got like this balance of product and product marketing being really, really closely aligned to what the company is actually offering from a product perspective. Then you have brand marketing who kind of goes a bit broader than that. But they have to work together because if you're setting the expectation that you're doing something or solving a problem in the broader audience, but when it comes down to actually buying something, the buyer wants to know that they're buying a product that actually solves that problem that they have. So I think it's like the wider net is like more of like the brand marketing, but then like getting down to like specifics around what the buyer is going to be purchasing is the product marketing product fit.
Yeah, and I think that's part of like this challenge that we've seen happen, especially over the last few years, is I'm a big believer in building a brand. I think it's super underrated, and a lot of companies seem to focus more on demand, which I think can't exist without brand. But I think one of the missteps that we've made is as they get bigger and that kind of broader vision, we start getting away from like what exactly do you do that I think product
Yeah.
marketing articulates so well. And one of the examples that I've seen is, like you'll be on a company's website. It's like we're the revenue engine. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Mean.
Like, do you just generate
Yeah.
revenue automatically for me? Because I mean, everyone would buy that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Right. It sounds great. Where do I sign up?
where do I sign it? Like, take my money now. Like, please help
Yeah.
me. But what's
Yeah.
interesting about it is I think if I talk to the product marketer there, they would probably say exactly what the product does in like one sentence or phrase that it's kind of like when someone asks you like when you're out at a social event they're like, oh, what do you do, and you tell them like the quickly what you do and they're like, oh, that makes sense. I feel
Yeah.
like we need more of that. It doesn't mean that you can't still build a brand and invoke these feelings, but I think it's gotten a little high and mighty because now we're
Yeah.
talking about it in like nomenclature that like an average person would never say. And then, I see like I talk to a product marketer and they're like, oh, we do this. I'm like, okay, that I know what you do and I know how
Yeah.
you
It
would
makes
solve
sense
my
to me.
problem. It makes
Right.
sense to me. I have that problem.
Yeah.
So, how do you think about who should really own messaging? Because oftentimes, from my experience, product marketing creates a lot of the product messaging to be used, but they don't necessarily always own the website, which is the
Right.
biggest place where it's used, or they don't control what goes in ads. And so it goes to like a brand team or a demand gen team who then does lots of testing and iteration, but ends up becoming kind of like this convoluted version of it that is somewhat perplexing to, I think, customers.
Yes. I completely agree, and I don't know how to balance that. I mean, to me, it's I understand the need to cast a wide net, and to make the broad statements and to get the sound bites out there. I mean, there is definitely like the marketing aspect of marketing, right? You want to create the loudest voice you can for the least amount of dollars. And everyone kind of got on the AI bandwagon a while ago and started putting AI and or blockchain, right? Remember blockchain was the thing a couple years ago, and so you get this big wide net. Oh my God, I'm interested in AI or blockchain. Then you go to the website and it's like those general things like revenue engine or, AI optimization. But then it's like, okay, well, what vertical are you actually focusing? Oh, you're in supply chain. Well, I'm not in supply chain. So I'm going to bounce, right? Like you're going to have that because that's kind of the nature of, I guess, brand marketing is to cast that wider net. But getting people to the website, that's the responsibility. But I think once they get there, understanding is this something that fits my role in my company very, very quickly is super important. And maybe that's where the product marketing handoff happens, because if I go to the website, I'm not in supply chain and I'm not a buyer, like that should be pretty clear to me. I shouldn't be wasting my time setting up a demo when ultimately this solution does not fit me in the you know the medical field, right? So
Well, and that's why I would love to see, and maybe this is a pipe dream, so bear with me, but I would love to see more CMOs be people that were product marketers, because I think that would help address the issue a lot. Or having product marketing report directly to the CEO and just really elevating the functional area, because I do think we are bombarded with so many messages these days. And I think people are just like, tell me what you do in a clear and direct way.
yeah,
And yeah, maybe your more bigger vision messaging is more of that thought leadership that comes out. I think that is really more impactful. But I would love to know in like 2 seconds, what do you do? How much do you cost? Can you
yeah,
solve my problem?
exactly, exactly. And you know, I mean, quickly, are you a fit for me? You know, I think if you can't answer that by laying on someone's webpage within like 2 seconds, then you've lost that ad, right? I mean, you paid to have my eyeballs on your website, but if you can't answer that question, that's money down the drain, really.
Yeah, and now I went to your competitor who maybe could answer that question. I think that's been like there have been lots of software companies, and Drift I think is a good example. It felt like, 5, 6 years ago, everyone was using Drift
Yeah,
and they were kind of like the chat platform. And then they
exactly.
started like, and that was really clear. And then they started kind of like morphing their language into like conversation, so, like, I can't remember what it was.
Commerce, yeah,
Yeah.
conversational commerce, and
And I
yeah.
was like, I do you still do chat? Like, like what do you just do smarter chat? Like what
Yeah,
I just talk to me like in a really simple tone. And I think
yeah,
that's important because we do get so many messages thrown at us. I don't have time to go read 6 pages on your website to see if you can actually do what I need you to do.
yeah,
And I don't want to, which is what I end up doing a lot these days, is having back channel conversations with people asking, like, hey, do you use this platform? Do they actually do this? Because I'm not really sure. And I don't want to get on a call with a salesperson and have to go through 6 calls to find out, oh, you're not a good fit for me, or oh, your
yeah.
pricing's too high.
The worst is, yes, they used to, you know, and then you're like, well, why would they change? Like that's what I wanted, and now I can't actually get what I want from a vendor that used to do that.
Yep, that does happen a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've had a long career in product. What do you think has been the hardest about like establishing a career in product management, product marketing?
I mean, I think it's trying to I think that, you know, the longer you're in here, like you're doing this, like it's not the challenge of like launching a product, it's like building teams. And I think, you know, a lot of this is trying to find product managers that are hungry. You know, they're humble and they're smart. You know, we used to have this thing at Data AI, and it was probably the only thing I think was really great was, you know, measuring people by hungry, humble, and smart. And smart isn't like, you know, like IQ. It's more of like, can you actually work across teams to get things done? And getting people to kind of be on your side and be advocates and like feel the ownership that you have, like conveying that to others. That to me is what smart is. And then humility is like, you know, just potentially just don't be a jerk, right? And then hungry is the one that like I really look for in teams. um you know, we had those core values at exact target, and I think the one that I really liked the most was like think like an owner, or act like an owner, right? And feeling the accountability that you have, being a product, and also being humble, right? I mean, this is not your vision that you're executing on. You have to get everyone behind you, and that's the smart part of the personality. So I think right now, like the challenge I have is really finding and growing teams that all have that same kind of personality. Like I joined ActiveCampaign 4 weeks ago, and it has been amazing. Everyone is a great balance of like hungry, smart, and humble. So I'm really fortunate to be there.
Yeah, and it's hard because the hungry and the humble you can't teach. You can teach people to kind of work cross-functionally, and I think that's like a skill that is trainable, but you can't teach someone to be hungry and humble. Like those are personality traits.
Yeah, yeah, and the smart one's tough because like you can't have people that are technically very intelligent, um, but they can't get people along for the ride, and I think that's a big thing. Is like, hey, how do you find middle ground with other teams and work through that as time goes on.
So the other thing that you've done is you've switched industries. So you've been in tech, and then you've also been in other like more, I would say like what hardware
Yeah.
software combination industries. What challenges did you see? Because in a lot of ways, I think people think the product role is very similar across industries, and you and I've both experienced both sides of that, and it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big difference in industries. So I mean, I've been in telco. I started at Motorola. Then I went into SaaS with ExactTarget and Salesforce and Amarasys, and like had a good run there in pure SaaS. But then I had Oracle Micros, which has a huge foothold of point of sale systems, kitchen and restaurant management platforms around the world. And I think when you get into the hardware side, things are definitely different. We at Oracle we had customers that had a PC running in a closet, and they had been running that version of Oracle Micros for like 10 years. Like the computer was off the internet, like it was like in its own little world, but and running Windows 95. you know, and so you don't have those kind of challenges of going to that restaurant owner and saying, "Hey, move to the new version of software," which, by the way, is now 10 years from what you have before. SaaS is different, right? They log in, it's a different experience. They have new functionality. Like it just moves differently. So I've been able to see that across native SaaS companies and then companies like Oracle Micros that are moving to the cloud. And it's a different game.
It really is. It's a different world.
It's fun though.
So
It's challenging.
it is. So last question, what is your biggest go-to-market confession?
Yeah, yeah. I think go to market and launch it's like I think you're not a you're not a product marketer or a product manager until you've done one, right? Like that is really kind of like the milestone in your career that you'll never forget. The first time you launch a product into the market, and I think it's something that like I remember back a million years ago when I did that, but I also remember the one I did just a few months ago. Like it never gets old, but I think it is like the most important milestone for anyone who is in product management or product marketing.
You've been listening to GTM Confessions. If you love what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And don't forget to tell a friend.